Daly Ashley, President of Anne Arundel Women Giving Together, and I welcome you to our final educational presentation of our program year. On July 1, new leadership will step in, ensuring that our mission continues into our 21st year. My hope is that we always live up to the vision of the founders of the Giving Circle, that we be a leader in women's philanthropy by informing, inspiring, and investing in our members, nonprofit organizations, and community partners to drive change in our community. We do this first and foremost through our grant making, which drives the work of our 15 committees and study groups. In 2026, we saw the establishment of 2 new committees, Fundraising Development, formalizing our financial outreach and support, and Next Gen, supporting future philanthropists in Anne Arundel County. We are so grateful to the members who took on the creation of these committees, which enrich our organization and offer additional opportunities for members to become involved and share their talents. We encourage you to join us and welcome all to choose your level of participation, donating financially and/or with your time and ideas. There's always room for more in the circle. Before I introduce the sponsor for this evening's program, I have a short announcement. The location for the next Getting Together on June 9th at 5:30 has been changed to Blackwall Hitch in Annapolis. This is a member and guest event, so if you'd like to learn a bit more about us, reach out to a member you may know and come join us. These are really great social events. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Namita Murthy, a member of the Giving Circle and the owner of Murthy Facial Plastic Surgery, our sponsor for this evening's program. Dr. Murthy?
Thank you so much, especially for the opportunity to be here today. My name is Dr. Namita Murthy, and I am the owner of Murthy Facial Plastic Surgery. I am also a proud member of Anne Arundel Giving Together and served as Assistant Chair of Grants Committee this year. I want to thank you all for being here and for your commitment to this organization. One of the privileges of serving on the Grants Committee has been seeing firsthand the incredible work being done by nonprofits throughout our community. And reviewing the grants was both inspiring and humbling. And it reinforced how much impact is created when people come together with a shared purpose. So I just wanted to highlight my practice. So I do facial plastic surgery, and we're obviously in healthcare, and we focus on helping people feel cared and supported and help them feel more confident. And so the types of procedures that we do range from non-surgical to things like filler and Botox, but also to reconstruction, facial reconstruction. And I've had the privilege of seeing various patients who have been unfortunately victims of domestic violence and have been privileged to be part of their care in their recovery. And so I just wanted to say thank you again for the opportunity. It is such an honor to be a sponsor of this organization as well as a member, and I look forward to continuing to work with the organization.
Thank you, Dr. Murthy. Welcome, everybody. I'm Heather Cassidy, Chair of the Education Committee. Thank you for joining us for this important program about the impacts of immigration enforcement on our families. Led by Jessica Coulter, who is also part of our Giving Circle. She is the Executive Director of Annapolis Immigration Justice Network. And she is joined by legal expert Kyria Abreu, who also serves on the board for AIJN, and Laura Jane Willoughby, founder of Anne Arundel Rapid Response. We are so grateful they agreed to share their time and experiences from what they see every day. We want to spend as much time hearing from them, so if you'd like to review their bios, they are available on our website, givingtogether.org. I do want to let everybody know that tonight's event will be recorded to preserve the valuable insights shared by our panelists and our participants. So please welcome our panelists and our moderator, Jessica Coulter.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I want to first thank Anne Arundel Women Giving Together and the Education Committee for really creating this opportunity for us to share what is happening in our community around immigration. Families are being impacted, and even though it may not be on the front page of the news, it is happening. And while it is a topic that has become so politicized, the work that we are doing at AIJN and Laura and the Rapid Response Group are doing is really about neighbors taking care of each other. And for AIJN, it's about legal representation and due process. So I'm really looking forward to having this opportunity to share with you all what we're seeing, and to be here with our two panelists, two Anne Arundel County women who are dedicated to supporting our immigrant neighbors. I really want to thank Kyria and Laura for being here and sharing both your experiences and your expertise with us. So before we dive in with Anne Arundel County specifically, Kyria, I'm wondering if you can help set the stage and share about what we're seeing nationally in terms of immigration.
Yes, of course. And I'm actually going to turn it over to County Executive Pittman. I see he's on the call. I believe he has some initial remarks for us. So I was hoping you can join us. County Executive, thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, I'm really glad that Anne Arundel Women Giving Together is doing this, and you've got the right people on the panel, so I won't talk too long because they're the experts. But I just want to acknowledge that, yeah, this isn't political. I was speaking at the Hispanic Health Festival last year, and Allison Flores, who is our director of our Office of Multicultural Affairs, before I spoke, she came up and whispered in my ear. There were about 500-600 people there that were there for health services. And she said, when you speak, she kind of knew where I might be coming from. And she said, don't talk about the Trump administration and what they're doing. Talk about families, because you'll lose some of the audience and they just won't feel comfortable if you start talking about the political origin of some of the things that are happening. And that really stuck with me. Not just to talk to an immigrant audience, but to talk to any audience, to really bring this back to family values and children, and what it means to have a family member deported. But I also just want to say that the benefits of immigration for our county, for our state, and our country are so huge. I mean, our businesses could not survive if they didn't have an immigrant workforce, especially after COVID with the workforce shortage that's been there. Brooke Lehrman, our comptroller, did a really good study talking about Maryland, the impacts of immigration on Maryland. There have been lots of national studies. The other thing I'll say is that the Department of Justice has studied the likelihood of an American-born versus an immigrant committing a crime in the United States. And American-born residents are far more likely to commit crimes. And you can speculate about the reasons for that. I would say when you're working 2 or 3 jobs and you know that getting arrested might mean deportation, that folks are very careful about complying with any and every law. And also that immigrants are more likely statistically to start small businesses than American-born residents. I'm not dissing Americans, American-born people. I'm just saying that immigrants are of great value to the community. So we've done Welcoming America, where we're being assessed. We're doing a similar thing for seniors with AARP, whether the county is providing, the right kind of services to welcome and integrate and engage our immigrant neighbors. And that's been really, really helpful. One of the things we did in response to that, I was at last night, the first cohort of the new leadership cohort. It's a leadership training program. It was almost all Latino women. I think there was one Latino who really just want to serve their community, and they were in a training program about that, and they were graduating. So that's been fantastic. But the impacts of deportation are obviously huge, especially if it's a breadwinner in a family. And so we, through the Office of Multicultural Affairs and some of the folks that are on this panel and some of the great organizations and faith organizations in this county, created a family assistance network that you'll probably be hearing something about. We put 300,000 in our budget last year and doubled it to 600,000 in this year's budget to provide any kind of a service that might be useful to a family in that situation who's come to our social service agencies or to one of our nonprofit partners. And also for legal assistance for folks. Annapolis Immigration Justice Network is one who specializes especially in kids on the legal front. But that is also really important. If we run out of the $600,000, things may get worse because of the number of ICE agents that are coming on board with all the federal money that's there. They're all been trained recently, and so there could be more. Nobody knows, and nobody knows where they'll go. But if we need more, we've set aside $5 million in the budget for responses to the federal cuts, the federal impacts on the county. And so both food assistance and the Family Assistance Network are eligible for that. So we want to be there to help because it's really a crisis. The last thing I'll say is that while our police officers are very clear that they don't engage in immigration enforcement, they're also legally not allowed to interfere with federal law enforcement when it's done legally. We actually signed an executive order yesterday with a bunch of folks from the Rapid Response Network present. We did it sort of quietly. There will be a release, I think, that goes out tomorrow. It's online now with this executive order number 70. And do we have time for me to read you just a little part of it, a couple of parts? We have time, right? You want to hear? Okay, what it's actually?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it was written in some legalese, but there's some whereases and then what it actually does. So it does say, whereas ICE officials over the past year have consistently employed tactics seemingly designed to create fear and escalate tension, including wearing masks and hiding their identities, refusing to identify themselves, using aggressive use of force, claiming the right to enter private homes without judicial warrants, and not using body-worn cameras. These practices are unfamiliar to Maryland law enforcement and do not meet the high ethical standards reflected in state and county laws, which jeopardizes public safety and erodes community trust. And then whereas also Anne Arundel shall continue to prioritize public safety, including protecting residents from violence and ensuring accountability for all who perpetrate it. So that is sort of the reason why we're doing this executive order. And then what it does specifically, it defines county-owned facilities, ICE enforcement activities, and valid judicial warrants, and says that ICE personnel are prohibited from using county-owned facilities, including parking lots, parking garages, and vacant lots for ICE enforcement activities, including but not limited to surveillance, assembling, staging, mobilizing, detention, vehicle storage, or deploying equipment, materials, or personnel. So there have been a lot of calls, when the ICE is convening and starting to act, and sometimes doing these entering homes and things without warrants. And the police have often not been sure whether they should even show up and respond to those calls. This makes it very clear that they should. In the event of federal operations, including a surge in ICE agents or other officials, Anne Arundel County, through its public safety agency, shall ensure, consistent with longstanding practice, that established de-escalation protocols are used to protect peaceful protesters and ensure public safety. In the event that any person is injured when county officials are present, county officials shall immediately summon emergency medical services. So we treat these incidents, just because they're federal government doing them, we don't treat them any differently. We treat them like any civil disturbance. County Police Department shall investigate all instances of violence, property damage, and allegations of criminal conduct, including incidents involving federal officials, and properly document such incidents. These investigations shall remain independent of any parallel federal inquiries. Additionally, the department shall, when appropriate, collaborate and refer cases to the state's attorney or the Maryland Attorney General. That would be for prosecution. So that we felt needed to be clarified both for the public and for our law enforcement folks. And then finally, Anne Arundel County Police shall employ de-escalation tactics per established police policy in response to 911 calls regarding the warrantless entry of private homes and businesses, including by federal officials, to ensure the safety of all those present, consistent with its statutory authority, training, and established practices, including the use of body-worn cameras. So it's okay to call 911. and insist that an officer be present in those situations, and they will have a body-worn camera, and that footage is, of course, used in an investigation. So we hope that this clarifies the position of the county and the role of public safety when these raids are happening. So I'll stop there and just say thank you all for caring and doing the work that you do. There's a lot of volunteers who are stepping up, and it really is just out of human compassion and justice.
Well, thank you so much, because I know when I came into this role 3 years ago, how grateful I was for the real support that you show the immigrant community through almost 10 years of supporting AIJN, and the more recently the Family Protection Initiative, and of course this executive order. So we're very grateful for your support, and really kind of a great way to start our conversation tonight, because this is all of that support from the county level has really allowed us to do what we're doing. So thank you very much.
All right.
And I think now we can go back a little bit and talk about what's happening. What are we seeing, Kyria, in terms of the national stage in immigration?
Well, I think the county executive set us up very nicely. And I want to actually first, before we jump into the national trends, like you said, while we are going to give you guys facts and data about what's currently happening and what we're seeing from this administration, I do want the focus to be families, to be our neighbors. And so I first want us to have all this foundational knowledge of, one, there has not been major immigration reform in almost 30 years. We've seen the most significant changes in immigration law were between the 1960s and 1990. So what does that mean is I think it has opened up the lack of change legislative action on a big scale has allowed this administration to really push the envelope. And that's going to really, I think, speak loudly about the things we're seeing nationally. The other thing I want us to keep in mind, there are only three major buckets, three major ways that individuals are able to gain lawful status in this country. That's through, and this is like a simplified way, but through blood, sweat, and tears. Blood would be family petitions. So if you have a U.S. citizen individual or lawful permanent resident, which is also known as a green card holder, they may petition for parents, spouses, stepchildren. Then there's a sweat through employment. So we have employers here that will sponsor individuals to come work here if they have extraordinary ability. Some of our favorite movie stars are here on special visas because of the work they do. And then there's tiers, which are humanitarian petitions. So that's the population that we usually work with are individuals who are fleeing some sort of persecution. So they're seeking asylum, or our children who are unaccompanied, who have come to the border or a port of entry by themselves. So they've come without a parent, either fleeing some type of child abuse or some parental neglect or abandonment. And so I want us to keep that in the back of our mind, because I think that will speak to why we're seeing this trends and why it's so important to have organizations like AIJN, Rapid Response on the field, trying to make sure that our neighbors are getting the assistance they need so that they can see their cases through and hopefully be here for as long as possible. So I'm going to touch on some numbers because I think they really are impactful, and to me every time I read them. So first I want us to keep in mind here in Maryland, just due to all the changes that are happening, we're seeing a lot of people are really succumbing to the fear. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't know if they're going to be picked up by ICE, if enforcement, if they'll be detained. There's a lot of fear and uncertainty. And so a lot of people are leaving the country. They're going through this process called voluntary departure. The formal process in front of a judge. That means they're telling a judge, hey, I'd rather not risk detention. Please give me a formal order to leave this country. And I think this is important to understand how impactful the narrative around immigration right now and the fear that's being instilled in our partners who, like County Executive Pittman said, are contributing to our community, our taxpayers, are creating small businesses. And so last year in 2025 here in Maryland, there were 533 grants of voluntary departure. And this year, we're in June, so we're halfway through the year, there has already been over 700 grants. And I want you to know, I did a presentation last week, and it was at that time was 560. And so that means in the last, or maybe 2 weeks ago, it has risen 200. And I feel like that speaks volumes to just what we're seeing here. here in Maryland, and really on a national scale. I also want to touch base to enforcement. As you all know, or you may have heard of, back in summer in July, the One Big Beautiful Bill was introduced. Through this bill, there was a large budget that was given to the Department of Homeland Security to focus on enforcement, and we have seen that come to fruition. So in 2025, there was a total of almost over 100,000 cases of individuals being removed from the country. In 2026, once again, I want to emphasize we're only halfway through the year. There has been over 200,000 removals, almost double, really, if I give you the exact numbers, almost 70% more. And once again, highlighting again that this is just all due to how strict the administration has gotten. They are heightened scrutiny on these cases, really are not allowing individuals to even work through the system. Their goal is removal, and that unfortunately is happening. So those are some big pictures. I also want to add and talk about just the backlog that we're seeing in our immigration system. And so in the immigration court system, there's over 3 million cases pending. And 2 million of those are based on that category I mentioned, are those tiers, humanitarian-based petitions, so asylum petitions. I want you to have this understanding. When someone is applying for asylum, they are saying, I'm fleeing my home country because I'm being persecuted, either because of my race, my religion, my gender, political opinion, or because they are a member of a particular social group. People don't leave their country lightly. No one uproots their life because it's easy. A lot of times these individuals are coming with the clothes on their backs. They don't have anything. They're coming here really seeking refuge. They're looking for stability and safety. And this number just shows a lot of them are trying to do it through the system in hopes that they can remain here safe and established.
Thank you so much, Kyria. And that's what we see a lot at AIJN. Prior to this administration, the majority, almost all of the cases that we were doing were for children who were unaccompanied or who had been abused, abandoned, or neglected, for asylum seekers, and for survivors of trafficking and other crimes. And so it is a really important and difficult process to navigate, and that's how AIJN really started. Now I want to bring us into Anne Arundel County. So I know we have Laura here, and Laura, can you share with us a little bit what changed that made rapid response, the group, really form? How has ICE enforcement changed over the past year?
Yeah, well, I think maybe what I'll do to start is just quickly show you the numbers that we do have that are specific to the county. And all of these are coming from the deportation defense project. They had to FOIA these numbers. And I want to show what's happened. I mean, you can kind of see the trend, how they tripled. Like basically in 2025, ICE arrests in the county tripled over the previous year, more than tripled. The 2026 number that's there on the end, the 40, that's just through the first 6 days of March. And so they're on track for the 2 months that we have, they're on track to double, essentially. And we're seeing that in the field. And I want to address too this idea of criminality. I think that this is important. Many of the things that we've heard nationally are true also here in Anne Arundel County. And if you look at that second box, 75% of those, I guess 73% of those detained by ICE had no criminal conviction. Only 5% had a violent criminal conviction. And we're seeing the same thing here in Anne Arundel County. And these are ICE numbers. So what's tricky about that is that this is categorized a certain way by ICE. So these can also include people who have been charged, but not been in front of a judge for those charges, which means there's a due process issue, because once people are in the immigration detention system, they don't necessarily get to have their day in court. The other thing is those other offenses outside of felony And that category can include multiple misdemeanor charges, by the way, then you'll be categorized felony. Those other offenses include things like traffic tickets that have already been paid and adjudicated. And it also includes things like immigration violations. So if you entered without permission, even though I always like to remind us that immigration is civil law, not criminal law. So we're seeing 70% of the people here in the county of those apprehended in 2025 do not have any kind of record, tickets, never been involved with the judicial system. And then really, I think I want to talk about what happened here. It really was about a year ago. It was the second week of June. There was a week when there were several apprehensions in Annapolis, and then it moved north to Glen Burnie and Brooklyn Park, and it included a worksite raid at an apartment complex where at least 5 to 6 men were detained, and officers had asked for their identification and arrested them based on that. And that experience, I think, along with some earlier apprehensions that had been reported, really galvanized kind of this small group of volunteers. Some of us had been doing listening sessions with impacted community members, and we really ramped those up. And then over the summer, again, a small dedicated group of volunteers really pulled together and did some practice runs for 2 things. I mean, our listening sessions determined this overall community needs. One is that the county needed immigration-related response, confirmation, and community deterrence, so kind of proactive measures. So that would be confirming if an action is ICE or if it was another agency. What we were seeing is that if nothing was confirmed ICE, everything was confirmed ICE. So even police activity, normal police activity, but especially if it didn't include a marked car, people thought that that was ICE. So it was really heightening this fear level. Also taking community defense oriented actions, like just being in the neighborhoods, just being around schools, just to help kind of let people know that there are ICE on the ground. And then rapid response if ICE agents were there to document what was going on, to be able to capture any civil rights abuses, and then to connect people. And I think this is the most important, to connect people who were impacted and the families to existing resources. It also included, those listening sessions uncovered a need to access credible information sharing, identifying what was an apprehension, what was not, sharing that across the community. And there are social media sites on Instagram and Facebook where that is happening now through the rapid response. And then I think maybe the most important piece of all of this, connecting impacted community members to local resources. So having some type of an intake process to be able to identify what the needs are, and then to work to plug that in. And we knew moving into this that there were going to be more needs than what the structure here already accounted for, like what was already here. And so I think very early on, it was like there's rapid response, and then there's this thing called mutual aid, which is a new idea for many people. But essentially, all of these pieces kind of just started coming together. This is so Anne Arundel County. Like, that's one of the things I love about the story, is that there were already things that existed. Then there were these volunteers coming forward. And I just want to say everybody involved with mutual aid and rapid response are volunteers. This is what that some people spend most of their day doing this. Some people spend, when they're not working or taking care of children, they spend that time doing it. And so the Family Protection Initiative, which is a public-private partnership between the County Office of Multicultural Affairs and various nonprofits, is part of this like cohesive ecosystem that's coming to bear and kind of banding together to make this happen. There's a Family Protection Collective now that's front-facing. They do a lot of canvassing. They do a lot of community interaction, community preparation, family preparation. There's Anne Arundel Mutual Aid, which is called AMA. That's like small groups plugging holes. One of those includes the Familias Unidas Pantry of Anne Arundel. That is a special food pantry that provides culturally appropriate food items and delivers it, because it can be hard for various reasons from fear to lack of transportation for people to get out to the food pantries, and food pantries don't always provide the food items that families who might have a different cultural background come from. And of course, it includes the Annapolis Immigration Justice Network. And there's a lot other. I'm not putting all of the nonprofits up here, but I think it was really impressive what happened. And essentially what happened here, I'll try to speed up. So last year, I think what we mostly saw were what we call targeted apprehensions, or people were being picked up at their ICE appointments, or what's called the ICE app program appointment, or maybe at court. And then 48% of the 2025 apprehensions we know came from the criminal alien program that the county jails do participate in. And that's when somebody is in detention and getting ready to be released, ICE does get notified that they're going to be released, and ICE has like a 48-hour window to come and pick them up. That kind of all changed on January 13th. And that's when what happened, we call it an ICE swarm. And in the course of about 3 hours, ICE basically kettled is what we call it. That's what it looks like, kind of like an accident, although the experience is very different. It can be very hard to notice what's going on or to know what's going on, especially if you're on the highway. But they started doing what we call car kettling. And that's where you have one ICE agent car that will get in front of their target car, another behind, another on side, and then they will very suddenly slow down. This happens so quickly, you have no idea it's going on. Just like as people drive by, they might not realize what this is. This is a car kettle where somebody is being arrested by immigration agents. So on the 13th of January, that's actually where this video is from. It shows you up close what the kettling looks like. There were at least 6 confirmed car kettles. There ended up being 10 people arrested. This was down in Annapolis. The ripples went far and wide. But we had all of these pieces across the community that just suddenly, within the course of, I feel like it was 1 or 2 hours, came together and responded, so that I do believe the vast majority of those who were impacted that day did receive help. I also want to let you know about the car kettling. I think this is important. When it's going on, you have no idea what's going on. I say this because I actually was blocked in by ICE agents. You don't know what's going on necessarily, and they don't put on their lights or sirens until the very end. So it is like a very scary thing that's happening. You don't know what's going on as it's happening, and it does cause a lot of fear. And so mainly what we're seeing right now, instead of these targeted apprehensions, what we've been confirming are what we call these car kettles. And we've started referring them to ghost cars because they happen within 2 to 4 minutes. The person is basically grabbed out of their vehicle, sometimes multiple people, and put into the ICE car, and everybody drives off. And it happens so quickly, what's left behind is this individual car. The confirmer's main goal, what we do is confirm what's happened, right? And we document if possible, but that's very hard to do. It then becomes confirming if what happened was ICE, and then identifying that abandoned car. There's a couple of things that are going on right now. ICE has started coming back and taking the keys if they've been left with the vehicle, and we have confirmed that ICE will return to some of the cars and drive it away up to Baltimore. So our volunteers have spent hours sitting by these cars that are at risk of being taken, just so they can kind of protect that and have the family not have to go through it. None of this, like none of my slides, none of what you're seeing here really capture this other side of things, which ultimately is what happens in the field and the importance of connecting them to the resources. And with the way things are now, the way things have changed, with the way that it's phrased by deportation officers that you have no option but to self-deport, you can't stay here, the things that are said to folks. I think the most important thing I always feel like is that they get connected to legal resources. And Jess, I have to tell you, when I'm in the field and if I do connect with a family member, sometimes we do notify them what happened. We are notifying family what happened. The fact that I can say you can get connected directly to legal resources and credible legal advice through this program that exists, and all you have to do is call this hotline, is probably one of the most invaluable things. And it's probably the reason I think that I'm out there and that I do it. I know it is for a lot of people otherwise. And so I'm kind of wondering, Jess, if you could talk a little bit about what AIJN has been doing in this respect and what you've been seeing.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I think back to 2017 when AIJN started. It was similarly, it was volunteers, it was community members who wanted to support immigrants and realized how significant the barriers are to getting a lawyer. It's so expensive. It's hard to find a lawyer that you can trust. Navigating the system is very complex. Kira kind of alluded to it. I mean, there's a 3 million case backlog. I mean, it can take so many years. And so that's really what we focus on, is connecting people to lawyers and operating our legal fund so that we can help make it more accessible. We've seen a huge change alongside with the rapid response, because now we've really expanded into this detention representation because, because of this ecosystem that you described. There are times where somebody is being detained in the morning, rapid response is there, confirmers are there, giving the hotline number, they're calling the hotline, which is operated by the Family Protection Initiative and Allison Flores and her team. And then we're getting that referral and getting people connected to lawyers that day. Sometimes we've had the attorneys can go while people are still in Baltimore to do that initial consultation and determine if somebody is eligible for any form of relief. And so that, the first time I remember over the summer when we got those first cases, Laura, and we were talking, and the first time I was like, that happened, I was like, oh, this is working. This is what we've talked about and planned. And so that is really incredible. And how many people and pieces have to exist to do that is really remarkable. We've really seen such an explosion of detention from something that we weren't doing. And now we're partnering with private attorneys and also with Mika Center to make sure that people can have representation when they're detained and have that due process. And we are hearing from our clients and from their families and seeing it, how brutal the conditions are in detention and how scary and uncertain that time is. So I think Kira's going to share a little bit with us about what can you expect when somebody is detained? What does that process look like?
Yeah, thank you, Jessa. And I do want to echo that, just the fact that I think there's a misconception that if you are a non-citizen, you're not afforded the protections of our Constitution. And I think it's very important for us to know and state that tonight, that you are. The Constitution has fundamental rights that do apply to all individuals residing within the United States. And so regardless of your status, and it's very important for us to have organizations like Rapid Response who are, making sure, and unfortunately due process violations don't occur, although they are occurring. It's important to just really have as many people on the field, because visibility really does make a difference. And so just to give you guys an idea, what happens when someone gets detained here in Maryland, they're taken to a holding cell in Baltimore County. ICE regulations dictate that they should not be in this holding cell for more than 12 hours. I will say, with all the stricter rules that have come from this administration, we are seeing that has been waived and extended, and people are in these holding cells for up to 72 hours. And they're in these cells without food. There's no ability to shower. I mean, imagine 3 days where you can't take a shower. You're not getting proper meals. And once they are processed, they are transferred over to an ICE detention center, and that is usually and will always outside of the state of Maryland, to remote states. And so what does this do for the families? It makes it harder to find them, harder to find representation that can get to them. Access, it really limits access to representation, because if you are in a remote state where you have no familial connections because you are from the state of Maryland, how are you supposed to get assistance? And so that's, some of the beauty, and Laura and Jess have talked about that, of being connected to representation, because you're a lot more likely to be able to get out if you have a representative that will be able to, stand for your rights and make sure they're not violated. So I'm going to turn it back to you.
And I think that Baltimore hold room is in the federal building in Baltimore City. And that was when there was a lot of news coverage last year about people being held for, I mean, we had one individual who was there for 15 days, and it's really supposed to be those short hours period that you mentioned, because the conditions are not for long term. They're not beds or showers and really inadequate food. I mean, the conditions that are described, I mean, are really, really difficult. And actually that same individual was then, as you mentioned, moved out of state. And he told me that it felt totally hopeless, that the ICE officer said, you just need to sign to be deported because you're going to be here. It's going to take months. And it's, just really hopeless. And he said, and that was until there was somebody who had a lawyer and they did something called habeas, and they got this habeas and he left. And this, of course, I was talking to him after he had also had a successful habeas petition that allowed him to be released. So this is so new to the world of immigration, habeas corpus. What is it? How is it being used?
Yeah, it's very new. I mean, it's always existed. A habeas corpus petition is a petition, a mechanism that allows you to petition to the court to release you because you are being unlawfully held. So this can be used in multiple areas of law, not only immigration, but we've never seen it used to this capacity in the immigration sphere. And that's really because there's been so many unfavorable decisions from the Board of Immigration Appeals, which serves as binding authority for immigration matters, where they have made it almost nearly impossible, if not impossible, to get bond, to have a formal bond proceeding through the immigration court. So now individuals, practitioners are having to default to reaching out to our federal court system. So there's habeas corpus petitions are filed with the federal district court. And we're being successful. That's the exciting part, because these detentions really are unlawful. And these individuals, like you said, they really are put in these detentions and are held for so long because the hope is that they will just give up. They will just say, I'd rather leave than remain in this condition. But thanks to representation and the creative arguments that are coming, I mean, from practitioners, I think that's one of the beauties of everything happening. People are standing up, they're holding the government to their burden and making sure individuals can exercise their rights. So through a habeas corpus petition, people are being able, what happens is the judge, if they grant it, they will either allow for immediate release, or they will send the case back to the immigration court so that they can have a formal bond proceeding in hopes that they are released. And I want to share a little bit. We actually had a case that came through AIJN. They were detained. So this individual, Anne Arundel mom, she's, one of our neighbors here. She had gone through the immigration system. So she had been ordered removed. She was fleeing persecution. A judge had determined or deemed that she didn't meet the elements of asylum, so couldn't grant asylum, but he did grant her what's called withholding or removal. So he's saying she cannot return to her home country of El Salvador, and allowed her to remain here with this order of this grant of withholding or removal. This allows someone to remain in the U.S. temporarily with a work card and with permission to be here. And she was doing monthly check-ins. And so she was, a known individual to the government, was following the rules of the game, to say it so, the requirements of her, at least her specific status. And in one of her check-ins, she was detained by ICE. This is an individual, once again, Anne Arundel mom, no criminal history, just another productive member of our community. She's detained. And because she has a withholding of removal order, she cannot be returned to her home country of El Salvador. So the ICE agents that were processing her were trying to scare her into picking a third country. Just pick a country. This is, I'm giving the information from the order. They're, causing chaos, telling her pick a country, pick Guatemala. And if not for the interpreter who is interpreting these conversations, told her outside of the scope of what was being told, you do not need to sign anything that you don't want to sign. Like, don't sign until you understand. And thankfully, her family contacted AIJN. I want to say that same day or a day after, that same day she was connected to representation. So an attorney was able to go in, represent her, and eventually filed an habeas, and she's back home with her children. And that's, the beauty of a habeas petition, that it really allows us to push outside of the immigration sphere and all these unfavorable things we're seeing, and not allow for people really to be taken advantage of by the system.
Yeah, and the habeas, I'm not a lawyer. And so but what we've seen and what I've learned is how quickly this has to happen, because it has to happen while somebody's still in Maryland. And that's the piece about the immigration court systems. You say courts, and many times you just are going to assume that that's happening in our judicial branch, but it's not. And so this is really kind of a crossover from the executive branch, where all of immigration happens, to the judicial one. Did I get it right?
Yeah, no,
Okay. Yeah, it really has been incredible to see it, but it has made the rapid response, having that immediate, sometimes when we get calls and somebody has been detained for many weeks and they're already in another state, that option becomes limited because of the representation issue.
Or it just means we have to outsource it to someone who's in that state, but that makes it harder once again, because that means, it's harder to create those connections when you're not from that state. And so thankfully, I will say, the community has, and I think we saw this, and Laura talked about this with Anne Arundel, the community really has backed up and has stood up and has really created a good ability to connect to other organizations, even outside the state of Maryland, if we do see an individual has been transferred, so we can find pro bono attorneys that will, assist with these cases, or paid representation that will assist with these cases in these other states as well.
Yeah. I want to ask you all about the impact on the community, what we're really talking about. What we hear is a lot about fear, and that there is a lot of fear, that there are a lot of misconceptions. Also, I know that new policies are being released, and really scary headlines, even over the last 2 weeks. In either order, Laura, if you want to start with maybe from the rapid response, what you're hearing from the community.
Yeah. Well, and I think, and I'll tell you exactly what what we're hearing for the community, and I think what we all feel. But I mean, I didn't mention this as much, but there is an increasing use of force that we have seen since like March, with the ICE agents who are on the ground. We have documented and confirmed warrantless arrests. There have been legal permanent residents who have been arrested, and they do get released, right? Like they're green card holders. It gets checked, and then they're let go, but they still have to go through the trauma of the car kettle, the arrest. A lot of people ride around in the back of a car with other detainees for hours on end, sometimes for the entire day, before they're actually taken and processed. And then there is the trauma caused on the other end, with the family members, with suddenly losing that breadwinner or partner, with that sudden change in lifestyle. Like all of a sudden you were maybe two in our household, but now you have to also fill that extra void. And it's all like the broken windows on the vehicles that we find is a good example of this use of force increase that we're seeing. And I think all of that just then contributes to this overall sense of trauma. And, the community is close. Like we know each other. This is like small Arundel, right? Like it's 2 degrees of separation, I like to say. Most of us know somebody, all you have to do is look to somebody, and that person is probably the person you're looking for. And so even if we don't recognize it or hear these stories ourselves, I think there is kind of this community trauma going on. We just don't necessarily realize that. And I say that because we really haven't seen a whole bunch we haven't had what we call an ICE storm, when ICE comes in and kettles 2 or more cars for a while. And it's and not in Annapolis for a couple of months that we know of, but usually down there we're going to know about it. More activity in North County. But over the past, it's like there's this sense of apprehension to more that's going on, because over the past couple of days, we've actually gotten more reports of like, I think this is ICE, and it's actually maybe more like unmarked police or something like that. It's other agency, but I think that that speaks to people feel watchful, and we're talking about citizens. I'm talking about this reports coming from citizens, and I think that speaks to this overall apprehension that has existed, and I think that more people are tied into it. And so, yeah, even if somebody is not technically at risk of apprehension, by now we know that there is profiling going on, right? Agents look to see who's getting in the car, and then they go and they look up to see who the license plate belongs to. And based on that, they can look up other information. And everybody knows that. And I think that level of fear doesn't feel safe to leave. I think last summer there were a lot of kids kind of staying in more than usual. And I think we're coming up on another summer like that. That means that there will be more need for food, because you won't necessarily have your kids going to programs or the school programs for lunch or that kind of thing. And so it's that I'm speaking here of that whole community thing, along with every time there's kind of, and I'm sorry I'm going to call it this, but there's a lot of like propaganda that gets released. And I say that because I follow the ICE and DHS and stuff, and like it's one-sided, right? They're publishing everybody who's in Delaney who has charges, for instance, and it includes like traffic ticket. I don't know. In my mind, I have, especially when I was young, a lot of lists like that. So I think it's that overall apprehension and the way it's impacting not just the community members who are impacted directly because they can be perceived as being an immigrant, but also this whole community thing that's going on.
Yeah, it does raise it reminds me of how many calls we get from naturalized US citizens or from people who are not at all involved, and there's some way, right? They're seeing the news and that fear is still there. People going to a biometrics appointment for their fingerprints that historically is fine. They just have to go and do it. And now it has changed, and that uncertainty. And there is no good answer, right? A lot of times the calls, I know it's somebody is seeking, desperate to get some reassurance, to say, no, it's okay. And the truth is that we can't say that it really is. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's like the least response I like to tell people, but it's true. It really depends, and unfortunately we can't guarantee anything. And even more so now, I feel like when I try to lean on my experience, I've been in this field for almost 10 years, and I've seen it through multiple administrations, but I can't really lean on that because it's so different. We're just seeing things that we've never seen before. And I want to touch base, just listening to Laura, just how we're seeing this impact in the community. And Jessica, you talked about this, how earlier in the year there was, I think, almost, was it 500 seats available in Head Start, a program that usually has a wait list. I feel like that speaks so high to really how that fear has embedded into the community, and people, are afraid to leave their homes. I work with unaccompanied minors, and one of my cases, one of my, we call them our kiddos, but one of our clients called me. She's like, my mom's undocumented. We only represent the child. What will happen to me if she's picked up? And that's a real fear. They don't know. Like, my mom's going to go to work today, and I don't know if she's going to come back tonight. And that's what we're seeing in the calls we're getting, which is hard to hear.
Yeah.
If I can just add to that, like, we do have families, like, when setting off to work, they have air tags on them. They're sharing location, even if they're not technically on the list even if they have status, right? Like, that's where we're at. People are burying their own air tags on their own body and in their stuff, and they're sharing location, sometimes with family and friends, just in case they are, in my perspective, disappeared from one of these cars, or from going to a biometrics appointment, which you're right, Jessica, has happened, or going for your ICE check-in, which used to be as not high risk necessarily, and now it's like everybody's potentially at risk of being detained once they go to those.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna switch because I know we're gonna have some time for questions. But before we do that, I want to share a slide with kind of ways that people can get involved. So many QR codes I'm going to share. So Okay, so hopefully you can see this. So this is obviously a whole lot. So a great screenshot opportunity, and I think we can get this sent out afterwards too. But here are just some of the ways that folks can get involved in volunteering and donating. There is so much need. There is, I think, what is so incredible about this county and the response that we've had from the community is really the collaboration and how we can all work together to each do our piece, because we're working with the same families and we have the same goals. And one of the biggest asks that I always have in any presentation, anytime I'm anywhere in the community, is to please let people know about the hotline. Let people know about AIJN. We want to help. If you have anybody in your life, any family members, any loved ones, any classmates, school, I mean, whoever it may be, to get folks connected, at least for an initial consultation, so that they know what options there are. And they could also do some family preparedness and planning if somebody isn't eligible for some form of relief. So I know that we have one more. Oh, and I think Laura is also going to share some of that information too. Before we turn over to the questions, I want to ask Kyria, in your work in this that is very difficult, what's giving you hope? What's keeping you kind of going as it feels kind of daunting?
Well, first I want to say I feel like there's so much more we could all say, and I want to share and to give you guys a little bit more context on what I do. I work with unaccompanied minors, and so these are individuals who have either been, abused, abandoned, or neglected by a parent or both parents, or they've been trafficked into the country for labor or sex purposes, or are victims of crimes. And so, literally the most vulnerable population. And I'm so proud of the work I do. And these children give me so much energy because they're the most resilient children I've ever met. They have such big aspirations, wanting to be a pilot, they want to go to college. And it's unfortunate when we see the system failing them. These are children who right now their protections are being challenged. There was something called deferred action. It was created in 2022, and it gave these children the ability to get a work permit. Because a lot of times, because our system is so backlogged, we talked about some of these numbers with the courts, and this is true for all the agencies under immigration. They're just years it takes to get to your final or hopefully favorable end result. And so this deferred action gave these children a work permit while they waited to be able to be eligible to apply for a green card to remain here permanently. And that's gone. And so now these children are here. They're kind of in limbo. They have their SIJS, their special immigrant juvenile classification. And now they're just waiting to hopefully eventually be able to apply for a green card. And it's hard to see these things. But what gives me hope, I would say, and this was actually brought to my attention earlier today, is that, like I mentioned, we're long overdue for reform. The last time was almost over 30 years ago. And I got to listen to a speaker earlier today, someone who's been practicing for many years and has seen right before there's been reform. So the past reforms that she's been able to experience, it's been like this. There's been one of the hardest times. And so while I can't say tomorrow is going to be easier or even next year, I do think we have to remain hopeful that there will be a very big change. And I want to encourage you all to really keep an eye out, talk to your neighbors. I think the most important thing is people to remain hopeful and stay, to not leave if they're able to stay, to really remain here. Because a lot of times when there's reform, the trigger to allow people to get status is in the United States on X date. And it's so important that we encourage our neighbors to really seek all the avenues possible. If they can appeal their decisions, if they can take it to the circuit court, really trying to extend and really push through these difficult times. I know it's not easier. I know it's easier said than done, but that could really make the difference, because it's a lot easier to do something when you're in the United States, a lot harder if you're already out. So that's my hope and what keeps me going.
Thanks, Kyria. And what about you, Laura? I know it has been a lot and just kind of a monumental undertaking.
It has. It has, but we're making headway. And I think, every time that model works and we can get somebody connected to the resources, or sometimes it's somebody reconnected to the resources. Sometimes it takes a little bit for everything to click in, but I think that's when it works, and it works well. And I think now I think we're starting to turn more attention towards preparedness for families and helping them get prepared and know what to do. And I think while we have a lot of volunteers and a lot of people who are dedicating their extra time to this, I think we always need more for help with that, for organizing those types of family workshops. Just for assisting, you might need another language to do like the actual paperwork, but even just setting up the backbone of the things, right? Like even just setting up registration, looking at different ways to do it. A lot of the larger workshops, like family preparedness workshops, people aren't, and even free legal consult workshops when they're offered around the county, a lot of folks aren't coming to those. Like that's where we are. That's the level of fear. So I think for us, it's looking at how are the different ways to meet that need and to be more proactive. And then increasingly, it's like the hotline number has been out there, but also just continuing to push that so that people know they have somewhere to call if they see something they think is ICE, even if you're not sure, or if they know somebody who's been impacted by ICE, they can pass that on. And I did drop the English language postcard image in, or somebody dropped it in for me, into the chat too. And so that's the other thing, is just as people are driving through, if you see something that you think might be ICE, call it in, because a lot of times we're not going to make that connection unless we get confirmers there on site and know for sure what it was. And from there, it becomes possible to be able to directly connect folks to resources.
Yeah, it really is about the community taking care of each other.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I see Choice here, so I think it might be time for our Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, you guys. This has been great. There's a lot of helpful information that you have provided. We do have a few in our audience. Tara Clifford asked, what is ICA Center?
Yeah, and I think Suzanne might have answered that. Suzanne Martin, who's the founder of AIJN. So that's Amica Center, and they used to be called Care Coalition, and they're a nonprofit that was it was the Capital Area Immigrant Rights, and now they've changed their name to Amica Center, but they are specialized in universal representation for people who are in detention and immigration detention.
Thank you so much. Next question. How will the Community Trust Act help? And can ICE go to schools? Will they comply with the law and do legal volunteers?
Can start us off, and if anyone, Jessa or Laura, have anything to add. So the Trust Act, it's meant to limit cooperation with ICE, and so I think I don't, and maybe Laura, you can speak to this. I don't know if you guys have heard of ICE going to school, at least here locally. I don't think I have personally, and so that is a thought behind that act, is really to limit sharing information with ICE, and that individuals can feel more safe going to those safe grounds like a school, church, and so on.
In the county, we don't have the 287G program anymore. That was killed in the first, 2017, 18, 19, I forget now. And I think that is a help. No, ICE has used school grounds for their enforcement activities, but they haven't showed up while kids are there in order to enforce things. But there have been, there was a really good journal article on from the Columbia Law Review, I think, and this might have been last year or the year before, about ICE using its subpoena powers. So I know for me, one of the concerns has always been if ICE decides to use more subpoena power, if they have more personnel, they have more people on the desks, will they start writing all of these subpoenas? to schools, and maybe the schools won't know, to then, go to their lawyer, or maybe they will, or maybe some will just fold. And so to me, there's additional, you're right, it's additional layers of protection and along with that comes then I think the education piece that's necessary. And then I think also I'm not a lawyer and I don't know all the different levels of things. I do know that in a lot of cases, folks who have been kettled have more recently gotten a traffic ticket, like kind of within 30, 45 days. And so for me, there's something there with information sharing. And does the Community Trust Act kind of help balance that out? I mean, I've always assumed that ICE agents look up in the National Crime Information System, the information on the person driving the car, but is there maybe also some additional protections with the Community Trust Act that come with that? So that's a really unclear answer to the question asker. And I'm sorry, I think it's because none of us are experts and experts in that. And I think the one thing I'll say about whether they'll comply or not, it is true. Like ICE officers do not give us their names and badge numbers. They often do not identify what agency they are with, although sometimes they do. Like one of the reasons we do like to get there in document and recording is so that we have that as evidentiary proof. And so if they don't comply, then I think part of it is just getting the proof that they're not complying with this so that you can pursue whatever legal actions you might be able to pursue with that. I mean, that's the name of the game right now. I feel like this is a you question, Kyria, because you're the lawyer in this group, but I know as a volunteer, it's long, right? It's a longer process. It does take longer, but it's also how you hold up the rule of law. It's how you ensure due process. It's how you ensure that these things that are in place are being followed.
Yeah, like you said, I think a lot of times, and really what we're seeing now, it's these type of initiatives are just a way to maybe try to slow down or allow for intervention earlier versus ICE obviously being able to just pick up and go. Because like you said, it's minutes, and once they're in ICE custody, it's a lot harder to get that release.
Thank you so much. Next question. What number do we call if we see what we think is an ICE action? Is it the 410-222-0319 hotline?
Yeah, that's okay, good. Is Laura going to share it? That's you call. And this ties into the other question too. That is a hotline that can be called. Oh, it's right on there. Not just if you see ICE. So for immigration legal assistance, if somebody needs help with those other things, when a family member is detained, the impacts on their whole family can be really widespread. And so this hotline is all part of the Family Protection Initiative to make sure that people have those wraparound services.
Thank you. And I believe we have time for a couple of more questions. Are there resources in Anne Arundel County for families that have lost employment and income because they have lost temporary protected status?
I mean, I would say call the hotline because I think that's always a good starting place. And we've been in such crisis response, I feel like, that I don't know, we've turned to that. It kind of brings up another thing we're seeing, which is we're also hearing from a lot of people that even when they have work permits, and I think this speaks to the TPS thing, and those work permits are valid, they get right up to the point where they're about to come on board and it comes time to review. And even though they have a work permit, it's not the right one. So it's like the employers kind of want people, and we're talking about maybe more white collar professional kind of desk jobs, like they want people, they prefer that they be green card holders. And I feel like this TPS question is kind of the same thing, right? And that I think navigating those changes of status one way or the other are difficult. And so I would say to start with the hotline. I hope that's okay with the volunteer call takers. They do have access to other resources. I mean, to be honest, so do we as rapid responders, and so do mutual aid volunteers. I mean, sometimes one of the best things that can happen is if a person has somebody to help them navigate this. And like none of us, I think, signed up to be social workers or case navigators, but honestly, it's hard for anybody to navigate this, let alone when you're facing multiple stressors. And so if you are friends with somebody who's lost TPS, or if you know somebody, if you're willing to jump in and start calling, like that's sometimes what I'm doing. I'm just calling and emailing programs, and you know, I always ask permission from the person. Is it okay if I share like basic information like this? And then I'm just contacting to figure out what programs are open, what programs are available, which ones they qualify for, what has funding. A lot of times, you know, this is outside of immigration. The programs will run out of rent support money, for instance. Like there are, I have to think there are some resources that somebody could tap into when something like that changes.
I also want to add, it's very likely there's just not enough resources. And that's really important for us to note too. I think because of this increased enforcement, we're seeing new needs. We're seeing, and you know, an increase of assistance needed for housing assistance, like Laura said, because what if the breadwinner is taken out of the equation? So that's also another very real reality. There's not enough resources. And that's where we, you know, encourage a community, and where we've seen the community stand up, and like organizations like AIJN and Rapid Response formed because a result of the need. And so I hope that, you know, because we're having this conversation here today, that inspires maybe one of you, somebody out there to create an organization that focuses on those social services need, because I think that's real and needed, and maybe there's just not enough.
Thank you both for taking the time to answer those questions. This actually concludes the Q&A portion of the webinar. Thank you to everyone who also submitted your questions and for engaging us this evening. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer Wazinski, the Vice President of Anne Arundel Women Giving Together. Thank you.
Choice. Appreciate that. Panelists, thank you so much. Not just for all of your great remarks and information tonight, but for all you're doing in the community for our vulnerable immigrant families and children. Thanks to our members and to everyone who joined us tonight, to the county executive for his remarks earlier. And thanks to Civil Management Solutions for curating our Zoom call tonight. As we wrap up, we want to ensure that everyone knows that this recording will be accessible on the givingtogether.org website under the events tab. So if you missed any of the information, the hotline number, the links to the different organizations that were mentioned tonight, you can go back through the recording and find them. As we wrap up, we want to make sure also, if you're not yet a member, but you were inspired tonight to give it consideration, you can further explore our website to find out a little bit more about AAWGT. We would welcome you to our ranks if you're not already with us. Together, we can drive meaningful change and truly build community together to make a lasting impact for our children and families in Anne Arundel County. Thanks again to tonight's sponsor, Dr. Namita Murthy and Murthy Facial Plastic Surgery. And thanks to all of our other 2026 sponsors that make sessions like this and everything we do possible. The Baltimore Banner, Sims & Campbell Estates and Trusts, Sullivan Surgery and Spa, Anne Arundel Dermatology, the Merrill Lynch team of Murray, McGarren, and Shirey, Sarah Greenlee Morris and TTR Sotheby's, Guard Your Smile Dentistry, Kendra Scott, and our in-kind sponsor, Day Talk Witten Group. Lastly, we want to thank our fiscal sponsor, the Community Foundation of Anne Arundel County, of which we are a component fund. This concludes our program for tonight. Thanks again for joining us.